Every culture throughout history had their legend of bloodsucker that preyed upon the countryside. The Asambosum that hung from the trees in Ghana and its neighbor to the east, Togo, they were said to have human-like features with some depictions showing them as more ape-like. With their legs that were hooked talons, the Asambosum would scoop up their victims. The Sasabosum from the same area were more bat-like with wings. Both followed with a torturous chomp of the iron fangs to drain one's blood, both resulting in the same fate, exsanguination. Japan has its terrifying kappa, described as a turtle-like creature with long arms and a monkey-like head. The kappa not only sucks the blood from its victims, oh damn it, I'm gonna have somebody else finish this because I can't stop laughing my dumb ass off.
He is such a child sometimes. The head is monkey-like but with a depression on top of the skull. Inside this hollow is a liquid that gives the kappa its strength. Not only will it attempt to suck all the blood from a person, but it will also remove the person's soul via their anus. To defeat the kappa, who are, murder aside, very polite creatures, one must bow to it. Bowing low in return, the life-giving fluid flows from the head and it dies. You might want to remember that trick, given the other method of attack that they have. They are said to reach up into swimmers and steal their livers. To do this, they have to remove the shirikodama from the victim's anus. The shirikodama in Japanese mythology is said to be a ball inside the anus that contains the soul. Remember not to bow too low or it will suck your soul out your ass. We will most definitely be doing a deep dive on all of these cryptids, especially the kappa.
Grandpa Reggie wants to tell you about a few from his time when he hung out with Plato and Aristotle.
Okay, thank you. Usmotas. Ancient Greece has multiple bloodsuckers running amok, such as the Impausi. These demons were said to have flaming hair, which would be enough of an identifier on its own. Yet they also had the noke and miss markers of one brass leg and one donkey leg. They were said to be the servants and sometimes children servants of Hecate. Hecate being the goddess of the night and witchcraft. While their true form was a hideous, bizarre monster, they would take the form of beautiful women to lure their victims to a secluded location where they would drink their blood and feed on their flesh. The ancient Greeks also had the Lamia. She preferred the blood of small children over the adult men the Impausi would target, Lamia being one of many mortal women whose use found desirable. This, like with all the others, was not the problem. Zeus's wife Hera and her notorious jealous rage. That is a different story. Once Hera discovered the affair, she turned Lamia into a snake-like monster and killed her children. Hera also made it impossible for Lamia to close her eyes, condemning her to an eternity of wandering the night in sleepless agony. Lamia continued to prowl the night in a vengeful rage, searching for children to kill as payback for what was done to her. Eventually, the stories were expanded from Lamia, the original vampire, to the Lami. Stories of the Lami were told to keep children in line. These half-serpent, half-woman ghosts were said to feed on the blood and flesh of the young. Another Greek bloodsucker were the Virkolokas. Stories about these creatures have been around for centuries and are unique in that many people still testify to having had experiences with them well into the 20th century. While many forms of the vampire are now labelled as mythology, the Virkolokas are still thought of in historical terms.
Transylvania has the second most famous of bloodsuckers, with the stories of Vlad the Impaler leading to the world-renowned Dracula stories. And then in the USA, we have the most infamous of bloodsuckers, known as the IRS. They will slowly suck your soul and bank account dry as they proceed to tax you to death. The list is long on bloodsuckers, from cryptids to mythology and folklore. Today we will take a deeper look at another bloodsucker cryptid, not quite as deadly as the IRS or Dracula, but definitely in a class of its own, and most certainly one that strikes fear in the hearts of many farm animals.
Let's go!
The Chupacabra. The Mayans and Aztecs had stories of the death bat known as Kamataz, the god of night, sacrifice, and death. No, not Batman, though it is sometimes said to be the inspiration for the character. In 1550, the Dominican friar Francisco Ximenez translated a collection of Mayan stories that were passed down through oral tradition. The book Popol Vuh, which translates to Book of the People, is where some say the legend begins. Now in the 70s, It was known as El Vampiro de Mocha, since some of the first killings occurred in the small town of Mocha. While at first it was suspected that the killings were done randomly by some members of a satanic cult, eventually these killings spread around the island and many farms reported loss of animal life. The killings had one pattern in common. Each of the animals found dead had 2 puncture holes around their necks. Actually, here's a more in-depth article about the incidents in the 70s.
1975, a string of livestock killings, complete with the Chupacabra's trademark exsanguination, at the people of Mocha, a small town in the island territory, wondering if they were the victims of some strange vampiric being. In total, 15 cows, 3 goats, 2 geese, and a pig were found dead in the first attack, with puncture wounds present on their bodies. The wounds seemed to indicate that a sharp object was used to extract their blood, and autopsies showed that the animals had been completely drained. Newspapers wasted little time in naming the unknown assailant El Vampiro de Mocha. The authorities' token explanation did little to assuage people's panic, especially as the death toll grew. Nearly 3 dozen animals had been killed by the end of the first week in March. Then there was an eyewitness, a woman named Maria Savito. Savito said that on March 7th she had seen a monstrous, screeching, bird-like beast on her roof, causing an awful racket in the process. By the middle of March, in the first few weeks of the attacks, upwards of 90 animals were dead. Soon after a Savito sighting, Luis Torres killed 2 unusually large Puerto Rican boas, both over 6 feet long. He claimed that he found them as they stood ready to attack a 600-pound heifer. The local news media was quick to attribute the string of deaths to the snakes, but the killings soon resumed when 2 goats were found drained of blood. The goats shared wounds similar to the previous attacks. Whatever killed those goats came back the next night and killed 10 more, injuring 7, and 10 additional goats simply went missing entirely. The Senate Agricultural Commission became involved at this point, and after speaking with local farmers and law enforcement, Senator Daines asked the superintendent of police to redouble his efforts in getting to the bottom of the situation. It was clear at the time that the senator didn't think that this was the work of a normal animal. 5 days later, a pig was killed on another farm, a large hole driven through its skull. And 48 hours after that, Juan Muniz was attacked as he walked through Barrio Pulido by a monstrous, bird-like animal that swooped down on him, attempting to carry him away. He managed to fight the thing off and immediately alerted the authorities. The reports of strange animal deaths continued into April and spread throughout Puerto Rico. On April the 2nd, 8 goats and a dozen rabbits were found dead in the municipality of Coazo. On May 13th, in contrast to the bird-like monsters seen so far, a man in Coazo saw what he said was a round-headed, hairy-tailed, and large-eyed creature that growled like a dog. This coincided with more animal murders in the area. The police and news media were powerless to find a suspect or explain the deaths. The attacks bled into the summer months, but slowly began to taper off after June, and no further deaths were reported past July. There was never any satisfactory explanation for the attacks, and some people accused the police of covering up certain facts to prevent panic. But ultimately, there is little evidence to prove anything, and the only thing of which anyone can be certain is that someone, or something, strange was murdering animals in Puerto Rico in 1975.
These stories started to gain world recognition around the mid-90s. The legend of El Chupacabras, as it is known in Spanish, is said to begin around 1992 when Puerto Rican newspapers El Vocero and El Nueve Dia, I'm sure I'm pronouncing both of those incorrectly, began reporting the killings of many different types of animals. Thus the legend was born and a name was given, which translates literally to goat sucker. The initial reports were of goats being killed with only puncture wounds. So like the IRS, it may have started small, but once it got a taste of blood, it moved on to other things. Chickens, which seems the obvious choice. Hell, everything tastes like chicken. Then it moved on to the rest of the farm, to even include cats and dogs. Now, I'm sure nobody other than the farmer gave a shit until cats and dogs came into play. Yet when the story broke out of Puerto Rico, other farmers all over found their courage and voiced their complaints. Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and the USA. And the USA, who already had the IRS bleeding the farmers dry, so now with the Chupacabra bleeding out their animals, it was a 2-tiered attack on their lives and their livelihood. The cat was out of the bag, or more so, the goat sucker was out, and the media and the populace ran with it. And like all other things, once the media gets hold of it, it became convoluted, and basically any creature someone couldn't identify became a Chupacabra. Hey, is that a monkey? Looks weird. Chupacabra! Hey, is that a mangy dog? Looks weird. Chupacabra. Hey, Madonna got some Botox. Chupacabra. You get my Tokyo drift. Chupacabras are said to prominently appear in three specific forms. The first and most common, a lizard-like being appearing to have leathery, scaly, greenish to gray skin and sharp spines running down its back. It stands approximately 3 to 4 feet high. It stands or it hops in a similar fashion to a kangaroo. There was at least one sighting where it said the creature hopped 20 feet. This variety is said to have a dog or panther-like nose and face, a forked tongue protruding from it, large fangs, and is said to hiss and screech when alarmed, as well as to leave a sulfuric stench behind. This variation had multiple witnesses and sightings. The mainstream patronized and claimed everyone who saw it must have seen the film Species and somehow couldn't tell the difference between movies and reality, including farmers who dealt with wildlife for generations, so go figure. The second variety also stands and hops as a kangaroo, and it has coarse fur with grayish facial hair. The head is similar to that of a dog's, and its mouth has large teeth. This variation is where the coyote and mange becomes more plausible, followed by a full-on wild dog version. The third form is simply that of a strange breed of wild dog that is mostly hairless. It has a pronounced spinal ridge, usually pronounced eye sockets, teeth, and claws, but it is otherwise a typical canine. This animal is said to be the result of interbreeding between several populations of wild dogs. Though enthusiasts claim that it might be an example of an extinct dog-like reptile, the account during the year 2000 in Nicaragua of a chupacabra corpse being found supports the conclusion that it is simply a strange breed of wild dog. The alleged corpse of the animal was found in Tolapa, Nicaragua, and forensically analyzed, and pathologists at the university found that it was just a dog, albeit an unusual-looking dog. A fourth kind, yep, bonus time. Witnesses claim some chupacabras are covered with black hair, have red eyes, a bulbous head, and bat-like wings, which lends itself to the gargoyle sightings. Sometimes they crawl on all fours, other times they stand erect. They are very quick, can climb well, and usually run away when seen. Some say their eyes have the ability to hypnotize and paralyze their prey. The prey animal is mentally stunned. This allows the chupacabra to suck the animal's blood at its leisure. The effect is similar to a snake or spider that stuns its prey with venom. The chupacabra sucks all the animal's blood and sometimes organs through a single hole or two holes, unlike other predators that tear the corpse apart. Now, with all the sightings in different descriptions and different locations, not to mention the different modus operandi, it brings the lump them all in together explanation that they are all simply just coyotes with mange. Seems like an outstanding stretch, even more so than the alien species hypothesis. In fact, many hypotheses have been presented for this phenomenon. One states that they are the result of genetically enhanced life forms from one of the many biolabs in Puerto Rico. Now, before we roll our eyes and dismiss this theory, Puerto Rico is the biolab capital of the world, and given the corruption that the island's government is known for, it's not that far of a stretch to have some of these completely sadistic farmer and bio companies doing experiments on different species. Another theory is that it's a pet of an extraterrestrial that's gone on walkabout. This theory is matched up with the theory that everyone just lost their freaking minds because of a B-movie. That movie being Species, which granted, the woman who plays Syl, the alien in that movie, can inspire some Helen of Troy type action. This doesn't account for many of the initial reports in the 90s where multiple witnesses and multiple farmers all describe a very similar type creature that stood 3 to 4 feet high and resembled a cross between a freaking kangaroo and a lizard, and it also gave off the stench of sulfur. Some even point to Hurricane Hugo as the cause for the creature's appearance. The hurricane did devastate the island and may have forced some rare species from its lair deep in the over 28,000 acres of the El Yunque rainforest. I'm probably pronouncing that terribly as well. The list of theories is long, and the list now of those that claim to have solved the mystery is equally long. Herein lies the problem. The truth is more likely something that hasn't been discovered, or maybe just not explained correctly, or even some combination of a few of the theories. I will point out, with recent declassifications of CIA records, we found out that every so-called conspiracy theorist was in fact correct about something every media and official lied to the populace for over half a century. So with all things, you kind of have to research and weigh information, and then clearly your best guess is going to be better than their lie. I usually revisit the line that the truth is always so much more scarier and fantastic than any lie. Now, if you made it this far into our first cryptid presentation, let's give the stats and lore for the Chupacabra that's used in tabletop role-playing games, and more specifically, the one given to us by Pathfinder that can be found in Bestiary 2. It weighs in at a CR3.
Chupacabras prefer to eat lone travelers and farm animals, particularly goats, and leave little evidence of their presence apart from the grisly blood-drained husks of their meals. Their tendency to stay out of sight combined with their naturally nocturnal activity often leads superstitious locals to conclude the worst, imagining that a particularly reckless vampire has made his home in the area. The typical Chupacabra measures nearly 5.5 feet from its muzzle to the tip of its spiny tail, and it stands just under 4 feet tall. With their slight build and lightweight bones, most weigh close to 100 pounds. They mate rarely and only during the hottest months, with the females each producing a single egg that hatches into a tiny dehydrated creature. The mother typically leaves helpless prey in her cave so the hatchling can immediately feed. Although Chupacabras are typically solitary creatures, they have been known to form small gangs in bountiful areas. Members of these groups work well together, growing bold enough to attack larger animals, small herds, and otherwise more dangerous prey. Stories of Chupacabras attacking travelers or laying siege to farmhouses typically stem from the hunting practices of such gangs. Regions where Chupacabra activity like this is more common often have complex and colorful myths and tall tales about Chupacabra capabilities or motive, and a few of the claims, such as that some Chupacabras can fly, are all too true.
They have a melee jaw and claw attack, the bite doing 1d10 plus 5 piercing along with the grab, and the claws do a 1d6 plus 5 slashing damage. Of course, if the grab is successful, a chuper action has the blood sucking commencing, and the character then suffers from the drained effect, which in this case is 1 times the level of the character. The character also has the max hit points lowered by this number, so the Chupacabra in tabletop games can put a hurting on your party. If you include the winged Chupa version that has a fly speed of 50 feet and maybe an elite version that medium size and stands eye to eye with the average human, you can have a great one-shot, save the village from the beasts event, all revolving around the mystery at first and then leading to a final confrontation and taking down this evil group of bloodsuckers. Now, if you made it this far into our deep dive, I thank you. My mother thanks you. My father thanks you. I thank you. Pounce on that sub, bite down on the like, and we'll see you real soon with some more monstery goodness. And by all means, leave a comment what you think might be the correct theory, because I sure as shit have no idea, but I would love to hear from you, and no theory is outside the purview on this. I really think when the hypothesis is outside the box, it is the most interesting. Sometimes you have to explore all roads, even the ones that seem ridiculous at first. These days, I remind myself of 2 things quite often. 1, I know nothing. And 2, I question everything. Thank you. Thank you very much.